What happens when one of Hollywood's most intense actors meets late-night television's most notorious host? You won't believe what unfolds when Tom Hardy sits down with Jimmy Kimmel for what was supposed to be a routine promotional appearance. The night starts with uncomfortable tension, escalates into professional warfare, and ends with one of the most shocking exits in talk show history. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is a masterclass in how quickly respect can crumble when egos collide. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds. The studio lights blazed hot as Tom Hardy emerged from behind the curtain, his trademark intensity radiating even in his casual stride. The audience erupted in applause, but something felt different tonight. Hardy's jaw was set tight, his eyes scanning the room with the wariness of a man who'd already decided this wasn't going to go smoothly. Jimmy Kimmel rose from behind his desk, that familiar smirk playing across his face, the same expression that had gotten him into trouble with guests before. "Tom Hardy, everybody," Kimmel announced, extending his hand as Hardy approached. The handshake lasted a fraction too long, both men's grips firmer than necessary. Hardy settled into the guest chair, his leather jacket creaking as he adjusted his position. The audience could sense it immediately. This wasn't going to be another softball celebrity chat. "So Tom, great to have you back," Kimmel began, though his tone suggested anything but genuine warmth. "I have to ask, and I know the audience is dying to know, what's it like being Hollywood's go-to guy for playing, let's call them difficult characters?" Hardy's eyes narrowed slightly. "Difficult how?" "Oh, you know," Kimmel waved dismissively. "The grunting, the mumbling, the whole 'I'm too intense for regular conversation' thing. Is that just acting? Or is that who you really are?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Hardy shifted forward, his voice dropping to that familiar gravelly register. "I think there's a difference between being intense and being authentic, Jimmy. Some people confuse authenticity with difficulty because they're not used to encountering it." Kimmel's laugh was sharp, almost cutting. Right. So when you're doing those Bane voice impressions at parties, that's authentic Tom Hardy?" "I don't do party tricks," Hardy replied, his accent thickening slightly, always a sign he was getting agitated. "And I don't perform for people's entertainment outside of my actual job." The audience began to pick up on the tension. A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the crowd, but mostly there was an electric anticipation building. Kimmel leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying himself. "Well, that's interesting because I heard from some people that you can be, let's say, challenging to work with on set. Directors having to repeat directions, co-stars struggling to understand what you're saying through all that method-acting intensity." Hardy's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. "Who told you that?" "Oh, you know how this town works," Kimmel said with a theatrical shrug. "People talk. Word gets around. I'm just wondering if maybe the whole mysterious, brooding actor thing is getting a little old?" The words hit like a slap. Hardy's entire demeanor shifted, his shoulders tensing as he processed what had just been said. The audience could feel the temperature in the room drop several degrees. This wasn't playful ribbing anymore. This was something else entirely. "I think," Hardy said slowly, his voice dangerously quiet, "you might want to be careful about repeating gossip you haven't verified, especially on television." But Kimmel wasn't backing down. If anything, he seemed energized by Hardy's reaction, leaning forward with that predatory grin that had made him famous and infamous. The confrontation was just beginning, and everyone in that studio knew they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. "Oh, come on, Tom," Kimmel continued, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Don't tell me the big tough guy can't handle a little friendly conversation. I mean, this is what talk shows are for, right? Getting to know the real person behind all those grunts and growls." Hardy's breathing had changed, becoming more deliberate, more controlled. Anyone who knew him could recognize the signs. He was fighting to maintain composure. There's a difference between conversation and ambush journalism, Jimmy. What you're doing right now? This isn't conversation. Ambush journalism? Kimmel laughed, throwing his hands up theatrically. I'm asking about your career, your public persona. These are things you've built your entire reputation on. Or are we not allowed to talk about the emperor's new clothes? The reference hit like a physical blow. Hardy's face darkened, and for a moment, the entire studio held its breath. Even Kimmel's house band seemed to sense the shift, their casual background chatter falling silent. You want to know about my reputation? Hardy's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried to every corner of the room. My reputation is built on 30 years of work, real work, not sitting behind a desk making jokes about people who actually create something. The audience gasped audibly. Kimmel's eyes flashed with something dangerous. This was exactly what he'd been pushing for. Oh, so now you're saying what I do isn't real work? That entertaining millions of people every night isn't creating something? I'm saying, Hardy replied, sitting forward in his chair, that there's a difference between entertainment and humiliation, and right now you seem to be confusing the two. Kimmel's laugh was harsh and artificial. Humiliation? I'm sorry, but if asking basic questions about your career is humiliation, maybe you should have stayed in theater where nobody watches. The words landed like a bomb. Hardy's hands clenched into fists, and several people in the front row actually leaned back in their seats. The security guards positioned around the studio straightened up, suddenly alert to the possibility that this could escalate beyond words. You know what, Jimmy? Hardy's accent was thick now, his voice carrying the weight of genuine anger. I came here to talk about my film, to do my job. But you've decided to turn this into some kind of personal attack. For what? Ratings? To prove you can take down the difficult actor? I'm not attacking you, Kimmel protested, but his grin betrayed him. I'm just asking the questions everyone else is thinking. Why is that so threatening to you? Because, Hardy said, rising slightly from his chair, you're not asking questions. You're making statements disguised as questions. There's a difference between journalism and harassment, and you've crossed that line. The tension in the room was suffocating. Audience members were looking at each other nervously, some pulling out their phones to capture what was clearly becoming television history. Kimmel's producers were frantically whispering into their headsets, trying to decide whether to cut to commercial or let this explosive moment play out. But Kimmel, high on the adrenaline of confrontation and the attention of his audience, pushed even further. You know what I think, Tom? I think you've bought into your own hype so much that you can't handle being treated like a normal person instead of some untouchable artistic genius. Hardy stood up completely now, his 6-foot frame casting a shadow over Kimmel's desk. The host's grin faltered for just a moment as he realized he might have finally pushed too far. The atmosphere in the studio had shifted from uncomfortable to genuinely dangerous, and everyone present could feel it. Sit down, Tom, Kimmel said, trying to regain control of the situation, but his voice carried a slight tremor that hadn't been there before. Come on, let's just… No. Hardy's voice cut through the air like a blade. I'm done sitting down, while you take shots at me for your audience's entertainment. You want to know what untouchable looks like, Jimmy? It's someone who hides behind a desk and a studio audience to say things they'd never have the courage to say face to face. The audience was completely silent now, the only sound the hum of studio equipment and the distant shuffle of crew members, who had stopped what they were doing to watch this unfold. Kimmel's face had gone pale, but his pride wouldn't let him back down completely. I'm saying it to your face right now, Kimmel shot back, though he remained firmly planted in his chair. And I'm saying it because it's true. The whole mysterious, brooding actor thing is a performance, and we both know it. Hardy took a step closer to the desk, his movement deliberate and controlled. You know what's a performance, Jimmy? This whole show, This fake persona you've built, where you think you can tear people down and call it comedy, where you mistake cruelty for cleverness." "Oh, please," Kimmel scoffed, but his discomfort was becoming more obvious by the second. "Don't lecture me about performance. You're the one who built an entire career on being incomprehensible and calling it method acting." The insult hung in the air for a moment before Hardy responded, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "At least when I perform, I'm not destroying someone else to make myself look good. At least when I create a character, I'm not using real people as my punchline." The accusation hit its mark. Kimmel's face flushed red, and for the first time since the interview began, he looked genuinely rattled. "Are you kidding me? You come on my show, you get paid to be here, and now you're going to lecture me about how I do my job?" "Your job?" Hardy's laugh was bitter and harsh. "Your job is supposed to be interviewing people, not humiliating them. Your job is supposed to be entertainment, not character assassination. But somewhere along the way, you forgot the difference." Several audience members were visibly shifting in their seats, some looking toward the exits. The energy in the room had become suffocating, electric with the possibility of violence. Kimmel's security team was now positioned closer to the stage, ready to intervene if necessary. "Character assassination?" Kimmel's voice rose an octave. "I asked you about your acting style. I made some observations about your public persona. If that's character assassination, then maybe you should consider why you're so defensive about it." Hardy leaned forward, placing both hands on Kimmel's desk. The host instinctively pushed his chair back, and the movement was visible to everyone in the studio. "Defensive? Jimmy, I'm not defensive. I'm disgusted. I'm disgusted that you think this is what entertainment looks like. I'm disgusted that you think tearing someone down in public is what comedy is supposed to be." "Then why are you here?" Kimmel demanded, his voice cracking slightly. "If you hate this so much, if you hate me so much, why did you come on the show?" The question seemed to hit Hardy like a physical blow. He straightened up, his face contorting with a mixture of anger and what looked almost like disappointment. "Because I respected what this show used to be. Because I thought there was still some professionalism left in late-night television. Because I was wrong." The words landed with devastating finality. Even Kimmel seemed to realize that something irreversible had just happened. The studio audience was completely silent, many of them staring in shock at what they were witnessing. This wasn't just a heated interview anymore. This was the complete breakdown of professional courtesy, broadcast live to millions of viewers. But the worst was yet to come, and everyone in that room could sense it approaching like a storm. Kimmel, desperate to regain control and save face in front of his audience, made the fatal mistake of doubling down. "You know what, Tom? Maybe you're right. Maybe I should have done more research before having you on. Maybe I should have looked into all those stories about you being impossible to work with, about directors having to reshoot scenes because you refused to speak clearly, about co-stars who've had to deal with your ego on set." The words were barely out of Kimmel's mouth before Hardy's entire demeanor changed. The controlled anger that had been simmering beneath the surface erupted into something primal and dangerous. His face went stone cold, his eyes narrowing to slits as he processed what had just been said. "What did you just say?" Hardy's voice was barely audible, but it carried more menace than if he had shouted. The studio fell so silent that the hum of the air conditioning seemed deafening. Kimmel, realizing he had crossed a line but too proud to retreat, pressed on. "I said maybe I should have done more research. Maybe I should have asked about the time you allegedly threw a tantrum on the set of that superhero movie because they asked you to do a simple dialogue scene without the mask. Or maybe we should discuss how you supposedly made 3 different actresses uncomfortable with your method approach." The accusations hung in the air like toxic smoke. Hardy's hands were shaking now, not with fear but with barely contained rage. Several audience members audibly gasped, and phones were being raised throughout the crowd to capture what was clearly about to become a legendary moment in television history. "Those are lies," Hardy said, his voice deadly quiet. "Those are complete fabrications, and you know it. You're making up stories about me harassing women to get a reaction on your show. Do you understand what you just did?" But Kimmel was past the point of rational thought, high on adrenaline and the attentions of his audience. "I'm not making anything up, Tom. I'm just repeating what people in this industry have told me. If you don't like it, maybe you should consider why so many people have these stories about you." The studio erupted in shocked murmurs. This wasn't just unprofessional anymore. This was defamation on live television. Hardy's publicist, who had been watching from the wings, was frantically trying to get the attention of the show's producers, but everyone seemed frozen by the magnitude of what was happening. Hardy straightened to his full height, his voice rising for the first time since the confrontation began. "You just accused me of sexual harassment on live television based on gossip and rumors. Do you have any idea what you've just done to my career? To my family? To my reputation?" "I didn't accuse you of anything," Kimmel backpedaled desperately. "I said allegedly and supposedly. I was just—" "You were just what?" Hardy's voice boomed across the studio, causing several people in the front row to flinch. "You were just destroying someone's life for entertainment? You were just spreading lies about me harassing women because you thought it would make good television?" The audience was now completely silent, many of them looking horrified at what they were witnessing. This had gone far beyond uncomfortable. This was genuinely disturbing territory. Kimmel's face had gone chalk white as he realized the legal and professional implications of what he had just said. "Tom, I think we should—" Kimmel began, but Hardy cut him off with a gesture that silenced the entire room. "No, Jimmy, you don't get to walk this back now. You don't get to say allegedly and think that protects you from the consequences of what you just did. You just accused me of sexual harassment on national television without a shred of evidence, and you did it because you thought it would be funny." The words landed like hammer blows. Even Kimmel's most loyal staff members were looking at their boss with expressions of shock and disgust. The band had stopped playing entirely, their instruments hanging limp in their hands as they watched the complete destruction of professional decorum. "I was just trying to—" Kimmel stammered, but Hardy wasn't finished. "You were trying to humiliate me. You were trying to destroy my reputation for your own entertainment. And now you're going to learn what happens when you cross that line." Hardy's voice carried a finality that made everyone in the studio understand that something irreversible was about to happen. What came next would be replayed millions of times across social media, dissected by legal experts, and remembered as one of the most powerful moments in television history. Hardy stepped back from the desk, his rage transforming into something far more dangerous: cold, calculated precision. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hardy said, turning to address the studio audience directly, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, "what you just witnessed was Jimmy Kimmel accusing me of sexual harassment on live television, without evidence, without proof, without even the basic decency to verify his claims. He did this for ratings. He did this for entertainment. He did this because he thought my reputation was disposable." The audience sat in stunned silence as Hardy continued his devastating address. Kimmel remained frozen behind his desk, his face ashen as he realized the full magnitude of his mistake. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every word for posterity. "This man just demonstrated everything that's wrong with modern media," Hardy said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "The willingness to destroy lives for content. The complete absence of journalistic integrity. The belief that celebrities are fair game for any lie, any slander, any character assassination you can dream up." Kimmel finally found his voice, stammering desperately. "Tom, please, I was just—" "You were just what, Jimmy?" Hardy turned back to face him, his eyes blazing with righteous fury. "You were just ruining my career. You were just making my children targets for harassment at school?" You were just ensuring that every future project I work on will be overshadowed by your lies? The studio was so quiet that Hardy's words seemed to echo off the walls. Even the crew members had stopped moving, transfixed by the raw power of his response. This wasn't just anger anymore. This was a masterclass in holding someone accountable for their actions. I want everyone watching this to understand something, Hardy continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute moral authority. This is what happens when talk show hosts forget that their guests are human beings. This is what happens when entertainment becomes more important than truth. This is what happens when someone mistakes cruelty for comedy. Hardy began walking toward the edge of the stage, but he wasn't finished. He turned back one final time, delivering what would become the most quoted moment of his career. "Jimmy, you've spent tonight trying to tear me down to build yourself up. You've spread lies about me harassing women, questioned my professionalism, and attacked my character, all in the name of entertainment. But here's what you failed to understand. Integrity isn't something you can take from someone else. And tonight, in front of all these people, you've shown exactly what yours is worth." The words hit like a physical blow. Kimmel's face crumpled as the full weight of public judgment settled on him. Several audience members began to applaud, slowly at first, then building into thunderous approval for Hardy's response. Others were openly filming, knowing they were witnessing television history. "This interview is over," Hardy declared, pulling off his microphone and dropping it onto Kimmel's desk with a loud thud that was picked up by every audio system in the building. "And so is any respect I ever had for you or this show." With that, Tom Hardy walked off the Jimmy Kimmel Live stage, his head held high, leaving behind a host who had just committed career suicide on live television. The audience erupted in applause as Hardy disappeared behind the curtain, never to return. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within hours, the confrontation had gone viral across every social media platform. "Respect Tom Hardy" began trending worldwide, while their Kimmel cancelled followed close behind. Legal analysts immediately began discussing the potential defamation lawsuit that would inevitably follow. Entertainment industry insiders condemned Kimmel's conduct as unprofessional and potentially illegal. The ratings told the story. Jimmy Kimmel Live experienced its worst viewership numbers in over a decade in the weeks following the incident. Several major celebrities publicly canceled their scheduled appearances, citing concerns about Kimmel's interview style. The confrontation had exposed something ugly about late-night television culture, and audiences were responding with their remotes. Tom Hardy, meanwhile, received overwhelming support from colleagues, fans, and industry professionals who praised his dignified response to an impossible situation. His upcoming film projects saw increased interest, and his reputation, far from being damaged by Kimmel's attacks, was enhanced by his principled stand against media bullying. The incident became a watershed moment, sparking important conversations about respect, professionalism, and accountability in entertainment. It proved that even in an industry built on spectacle, there are still lines that shouldn't be crossed, and consequences for those who cross them. Jimmy Kimmel had learned in the most public way possible that destroying someone else's reputation isn't entertainment. It's just destruction. And Tom Hardy had shown the world that sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty is simply refusing to accept it.